can start. So today we want to take a look on the first chapter. And at first we want to define what development economics is all about. Okay, so development economics is simply the process of improving the quality of all human lives and capabilities by raising people's levels of income, self-esteem, and freedom. So being a process, it simply means that we do not have a position that we end at. It is a continuous process. It is a continuous process of what? Of simply improving the quality of human beings. How do we improve the quality of human beings? Let's increase their levels of income. Let's try as much as possible for them to have self-esteem. Let's try as much as possible for them to have much freedom as much as they can. So simply by development economics, we try as much as possible to develop people's lives through increasing the levels of income. Let's try as much as possible. If you are earning 4,500 today, how can we improve the level of your income so that maybe at the end of the day, you are able to access better shelter, you are able to have access to better nutrition, you are able to have access to water and sanitation, also self-esteem, self-motivation. By yourself, how do you feel? You must feel motivated by yourself. You must feel confident about yourself, as well as freedom. Let's try as much as possible for each and everyone to have freedom, his or herself. So we have three kinds of economics. We have traditional economics, we have political economics, we also have development economics. How does these three differ? Traditional economics is simply an approach to economics that emphasizes utility, which is satisfaction, profit maximization, market efficiency, and determination of equilibrium. It is an approach of economics which places much more emphasis on satisfaction, which is utility, on how we can achieve profit maximization, market efficiency, as well as the determination of equilibrium. All of these are constituted in traditional economics, okay?
All right.
We also have political economics, which is simply the attempt to merge economic analysis with practical politics to view economic activity in the political context, okay?
All right.
Political economics is simply whereby we take economic theory, but that economic theory, we try as much as possible to practice it within the political context, okay? And that is known as political economics, exactly.
Okay.
How about development economics? Where we need to place much emphasis when we are studying this module. So development economics is the study of how economics are transferred from stagnation to growth, from low income to high income status, and overcoming problems of absolute poverty. So whenever we take into account development economics, we put much emphasis, how can we move the economy forward? How can the GDP of South Africa increase? How can we try as much as possible to eradicate absolute poverty? When we make reference to absolute poverty, We are simply saying there are individuals who cannot afford maybe to consume a balanced diet, maybe to live under a proper shelter, maybe affording all the basic needs, which might include clothing as well. So when we talk about development economics, we are trying to move away from that position. We want the economy to grow. We want as much as possible to eradicate absolute poverty. We have two types of poverty. We have what is known as relative poverty. We also have what is known as absolute poverty. Relative poverty is whereby we simply say that Duduzile has 4 cars, I have only 2 cars. I'm poor relative to you in that sense, okay? But when it comes to absolute poverty, yes, that is refers to as relative poverty. If there is one,
if I have 4 cars,
you have 4 cars, I have only 1 car, I'm poor compared to you.
All right, listen.
So that is within the context of relative poverty. But when we talk about absolute poverty, the World Bank defines absolute poverty as an individual who consumes less than $1.20 purchasing power parity. That is $1.20 in terms of US dollar. Ne? In terms of US dollar, we are simply saying that if you consume maybe $1.20, if we convert it to rand, $1.20 could be somewhere around I think 20 rand, ne? So
$1.
Yeah, okay. one US dollar, $20. $1 now is around 15 rand. So if it becomes $1 it is maybe around 19 rand, 20 rand there. So the World Bank simply defines a person who consumes less than 20 rand per day. If you consume less than 20 rand per day within the context of the World Bank, you are referred as being in absolute poverty.
Okay.
If you simply consume less than 20 rand, okay.
All right.
So, what do we mean by development? In a traditional sense, economic development meant achieving sustained rates of growth of income per capita, which is measured by GNI, gross national income. So in its traditional sense, development was simply achieving an increase in the growth of national income per capita. If we get to an extent of having sustained, by being sustained, it means it is what? It is continuous, right? By being sustained, it means this growth is continuous. Not this year, GNI have increased by 3%, next year by 0%, maybe next year, maybe 2023, it is now on a declining phase. But being sustained, we mean that each and every year, the growth
national income.
Yes, the growth in national income continues to increase and at a sustained rate. So what we mean now by GNI per capita, we have simply taken into account gross national income, we divide it by population. Okay, we are simply trying to find out the gross national income per individual. By being per capita is the same as per individual. Okay. So we are saying that the growth per individual must be sustained. So how do we calculate gross national income per capita? We simply take into account the gross national income, we divide the gross national income by population.
By population.
And then
All right.
we find the gross national income per capita. So we are saying that gross national income per capita should increase at a sustained rate. It must continue to increase each and every year. Okay, is it making sense?
Yes, if it doesn't increase,
it is not sustained.
okay.
If it doesn't increase, it is not sustained. So that's why we also have the government of South Africa. It has objectives so that each and every year the economy must grow. GDP must continue to grow each and every year. So it has an objective to have sustained growth in national income. Okay.
Okay. Sorry. Cool. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So there was a guy who was called Amartya Sen. He did put forward the Amartya Sen capability approach. This was another way in which Sen did define a person who can be considered to be poor, or a person whom is considered to be not poor. So the capability approach is defined by its choice of focus upon the moral significance of individuals' capabilities of achieving the kind of lives they have reason to value. So according to Amartya Sen, the capability theory approach is a theoretical framework that involves two core normative claims. What are these two normative claims? First, the assumption that freedom to achieve well-being is of primary moral importance. If you do not have the freedom to achieve the well-being that you desire, you are considered to be poor. Secondly,
which freedom? If I may add, freedom.
The freedom that we simply mean here is in a way that if you are also being able, if you have the freedom and also being able, if there are no limitations by freedom,
okay, maybe.
Yes, we are putting it into context in the sense that you have the freedom, you also have the capability, you also have the ability as well. So there are no limitations. There are no limitations for you to achieve a certain well-being that you do desire. Okay. The second one was that an individual must have freedom to achieve well-being. It must be understood in terms of the people with capabilities. Okay. He did take into account capabilities as well as the freedom to achieve those objectives or the kind of well-being that an individual wishes to have. Okay, so he takes into account one, capability, as well as the freedom to do so. You have a kind of well-being that you wish to achieve. Do you have the capabilities? Do you have the freedom to do so? Okay.
All right.
Are you able, and do you have the freedom to do so? This was according to Amartya Sen.
All right.
And it was known as the Amartya Sen capability approach. So it takes into account these two main facts: the capability in terms of opportunities, as well as the freedom to achieve the kind of well-being an individual does value. Okay.
Yes.
What are the 5 factors that affect national happiness. You know, there are some statistics. If you go on Google, there are some statistics in which there are countries that are placed into categories in terms of national happiness. Zimbabwe is one of the least countries where in those categories, Zimbabwe is one of the least countries according to the statistics of national happiness. So what are these what are the characteristics that they include? People are happier when they are not unemployed.
Yes. Sorry. So that's what they've discovered, that people are happy when they are not unemployed.
These are the main factors that they put into place to say no. A person can be said to be happy if he is employed. This one might sound to be subjective, of course. There are some who say, no, I'm happy if being divorced.
Maybe it's true.
It's what?
Maybe it's true that people are happier when they are not divorced or separated.
But
my God.
But yeah, of course, it could be subjective because some they say, especially to now depend with the status. You know, someone who supports that people are happier when they are not divorced. He or she could be not divorced.
All right.
Of course, ne?
Oh, yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So these are the main characteristics that they take into account. People are happier when they are not unemployed. This is 100% true. When they are not divorced or separated, you have a high trust in the society.
High trust?
Yes, high trust in the society that you live. If you do not have trust in the society that you live, you cannot be happy, I believe. Would you be happy in a society that you do not trust? At any time,
no.
At any time, you might lose your life.
Yes, or when you go, people, they will come and just break in, things like that.
Anytime, you might lose your property. But if you are in a society that is much more secured, of course, enjoy high government quality. You know, there are many countries in which many citizens, they will be complaining about the government and the like. So this is also one of the characteristics. People are happier.
When there's no load shedding.
Yeah, of course, that's one of the factors. But I think nowadays it's quite better.
It's much better. Yeah, it's better now.
Yeah, it's quite better now. Okay, if they enjoy high government quality, the other point, you have religious faith. The other point, you have financial security.
All right.
Do you think this is where the list ends, or?
Yeah, I think so. This is enough.
This is the main characteristics
for people to be happy. Yes.
Yeah, for people to be happy.
This affected. I'm telling you.
You have to be employed, not divorced. You have trust in the society that you are. You enjoy the government quality. You have religious faith, and also in terms of financial stability. Of course, these are the main characteristics. Okay, so these are the factors that affect national happiness. Okay.
Okay.
Let's take a look on the three core values. Three core values of development as described by the new economic view of development. Okay, so we want to take a look on the three core values. What are these three core values? We have sustenance, we have self-esteem, we also have freedom. Okay, so sustenance, what are we referring to? Basic goods and services such as food, clothing, there must be a comma here, such as food, clothing, and shelter that are necessary to sustain an average human being at the bare minimum of living. So when we take a look on sustenance, we are referring to food. The individual must have access to food, must have enough access to clothing, must have enough access to shelter, him or herself. This is included in sustenance, which is one of the main core value of development. So when we refer to the core values of development, let's try as much as possible to increase sustenance on each and every individual. Let's try as much as possible for each and every individual to have self-esteem. Let's try as much as possible for each and every individual to have as much as freedom as he or she can have, okay? So when we take a look on self-esteem, it is the feeling of worthiness. At some point in time, you must not feel unworthy because you are unemployed. You must not feel unworthy because you are divorced. Okay. Self-esteem, the feeling of worthiness that a society enjoys when its social, political, and economic systems and institutions promote human values such as respect, dignity, and self-determination. So self-esteem is hugely tied to respect, to dignity, as well as self-determination. These are the main three characteristics that we tie up with self-esteem. Respect, it could be self-respect, dignity, how people view you, how people see you. It could be also self-determination. Okay, we also take into account, yes?
I wanted to ask, they also included the human values such as respect. Do we really demand respect from the society?
Yes, we really demand a respect from the society, but at first it starts from self-respect.
Yes, okay.
First, it starts from self-respect.
Self-respect.
Yes. Even respect from the society as well. It is one of a major impact to individual worthiness, of course. If you are not respected within the society that you live, of course, at some point in time, you might feel unworthy.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
Freedom, a situation in which a society has at its disposal a variety of alternatives from which to satisfy its wants and individuals enjoy real choices. So by freedom, we are saying that at some point in time, the society must have freedom of choice. They must be able to select upon various alternatives. No one must choose for you. It could be in terms of politics. It could be in terms of economics itself. Individuals must have freedom. Okay. At its disposal, it must have various alternatives to choose from. You select what you feel you want. You simply choose. If you want to vote for ANC, no one must force you not to.
Okay.
That is
It's a
within the
freedom
context
of choice.
of politics. Ne? So you must have the freedom. If you want to wear a political regalia of what is the other a political institution is what?
Party, it's EFF.
Yes. If you want to wear the regalia of an opposition party, you have the freedom to do so. You know, in other countries, you can be killed for that. Okay. So South Africa is one of a nation in which there's freedom of choice. It's actually higher compared to other nations like Nigeria, like Zimbabwe and the like. Okay. So these are the three core values of development. Place emphasis on sustenance.
In South Africa only.
In terms of freedom.
These ones. Yes,
no.
This one.
No, you mean
in terms
all of them.
Freedom.
Yeah, you mean all of them or in terms of freedom?
In terms of freedom.
Okay, in terms of freedom, I was simply saying South Africa is one of a nation in which the freedom of choice is quite higher compared to other nations.
To other nations.
Africa, you can if you want maybe to wear a political regalia of opposition party, you can do so.
Yes.
You can do so. You have freedom. But of course, to my own perspective, it goes to a much higher extent. Freedom maybe now, you know, other countries they do not permit maybe a female to date another female. That is also some kind of freedom. Ne? They say I have freedom over my body, freedom over my feelings. If I'm a man, if I want to date another man, I have the freedom to do so.
Freedom to do so.
Yeah. But in Zimbabwe, you are not able.
I heard that. I heard that in Zimbabwe, that is not acceptable.
It is not acceptable. You are not able
to
do that. But here in South Africa, yeah, it's nothing.
It's normal now.
Yeah, it's normal. Okay, so that is also some kind of freedom. Ne?
All right.
So what are MDGs, Millennium Development Goals? 1, eradicate extreme poverty and hunger. These are the MDGs. 2, achieve universal primary education. Everyone must be able to access primary education. Promote gender equality and empower women.
Yes.
I knew you were going to support that.
Very true. Also having inequalities. Yeah.
Yeah, the levels of inequalities they are very high, especially but I think nowadays, in terms of women and men, the levels of inequality they are not much higher. But in terms of race, Black Africans, whites, the levels of inequality is very high in terms of color, in terms of race. It's very high. Reduce child mortality. Improve maternal health.
Mhm.
Fifth one, combat HIV, malaria, and other diseases. HIV nowadays is now a small talk. Many countries, many people are now placing much emphasis on the pandemic. But this is also one of the Millennium Development Goals. Increase or improve environmental stability. But here in Africa, we do not put much emphasis on the environment itself. Okay. We do not try as much as possible to reduce land pollution, air pollution, and the like. This is one of a goal that is much taken into account in the Western countries. Here in Africa, dig as much as you can, as long as we make money out of it. Deforestate as much as you can, as long as we can make money out of it. But within the Western community, they place much emphasis on the environment. Okay.
All right.
So the last one is global partnership for development. Let's try as much as possible to start operating on a global scale. So these are the 8 Millennium Development Goals. Eradicate extreme poverty. Everyone must be able to access water and sanitation. Everyone must be able to consume a balanced diet. Everyone must be able to have a secured shelter.
Very true.
Primary education, gender equality, reduce child mortality. So child mortality, these are children under the age of 1 year.
Okay.
That does lose their lives. Improve maternal health, of course. This is also one of the characteristics that is tied with child mortality. If there is poor maternal health, at the end of the day, we will have a high child mortality. Combat HIV, yes, malaria, other diseases, diarrhea, bilharzia. There are many countries that are still struggling with such diseases. Okay, environmental stability as well as global partnership. Okay.
All right.
The HDI. So the HDI is one of the characteristics that is also used to measure how a nation has developed over time. How a nation has developed over time, we use the Human Development Index. Okay. So it is an index that does measure national socioeconomic development based on combining measures of education, health, and adjusted real income per capita. So this is one of a measure. When we want to, let's say we want to compare how developed South Africa is over Botswana. We take into account education. We take into account the health system. We take into account real national income per capita. Real national income per capita is whereby now, this is different from nominal income. Real income is whereby we say we calculate national income, but we calculate national income using base periods. Okay, we calculate national income using base periods. Per capita, like we have said before, is whereby now we take into account the real income, we then divide it by the population. Okay, so this is one of the best measure in which we can measure the levels of development. We use the Human Development Index. The Human Development Index takes into account education, takes into account the health system. It also takes into account the real income the capital. Okay.
Mm-mm.
What are the
Okay.
three components of the HDI? Health. We take health into account of life expectancy. Life expectancy in South Africa is what? Around 50, if I'm not mistaken. So life expectancy is simply when we say, no, a child has been born, how long is this child able to live? It is simply an average amount of years that a child born is expected to live. Okay. So
do they measure that?
it's not actually measured, but it's simply an average that is put into account to say, no, nowadays
An estimate.
yeah, it's simply an estimate whereby we take into account the economic conditions. So in those economic conditions, if we take the life expectancy here in South Africa and the life expectancy of someone in Australia, it is very different. Ne? In Australia, economic conditions, they are quite stable compared to here in South Africa, right? Here in South Africa, we take into account the levels of unemployment. We take into account the levels we take into account inflation levels. We take into account what else? We take into account poverty.
Yes.
And then we come up with an average amount of years that an individual is expected to live. If you go on Google, if you simply type the life expectancy in South Africa, you see it's around
Google.
Yeah, it's around 50 something years. If you compare it with the life expectancy in Australia, you can see that in Australia it is maybe around 70 something years. Why? Because the economic conditions there, they can what? They can sustain an individual up to 70 something years compared to here in South Africa. Here in South Africa, because of crime rates, you can be shot anytime while at least you are driving. But in Australia, that is not applicable. Ne?
I see. Okay. It depends on the economic condition. All right.
It depends on the economic conditions. It depends on the social conditions of that nation. So if you check on Google, you see that in South Africa, it's somewhere around 50. In Western nations, somewhere around 70.
Okay.
Another component of the HDI of the HDI is education, whereby we mean the years of schooling, expected years of schooling. This is also one of a major factor that we take into account in the Human Development Index. Years of schooling, expected years of schooling. What do you think is the expected years of schooling here in South Africa? Around
I'm not sure. Okay. I don't know.
Yes, so we simply take into account the expected years of schooling a child has been born, how do we expect this child to be in school? How many years? Maybe 17 years, 7 years. In 7 years in primary education, maybe 5 years in what? In secondary education, maybe another 4 years in what? In tertiary education. So we simply come up with the expected years of schooling. It could be 17. Okay.
17 years.
Yeah, 17 years, right?
All right.
The other component of HDI is the living standards, which is simply measured through gross national income per capita. So even the gross national income per capita here in South Africa is also quite lower than gross national income per capita in Australia or in the Western countries. Okay.
Okay.
So these are the components that are taken into account. So you will see that on this HDI, you will see that South Africa will be on a lower bracket compared to Western countries, right? Because in Western countries, the life expectancy is higher. The expected years of schooling is also higher. The living standards measured through gross national income per capita is also high. So Western countries, they tend to be on a higher, on a better page compared to African countries. Okay.
Okay.
So this is all that is included in the first chapter. The first chapter is one of the shortest chapter on all chapters that we are going to take into account.
All right.
It's one of the shortest chapter. Do you have any questions?
No, I think everything is clear for now. I've learned.
Everything is clear for now. Okay.
And it was short.
It was short, exactly. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to send you these slides. I'm going to send it